That's all. Yeah. Yeah, so the next one was in Ireland, and there's a lady there who's very generously having us stay in her home actually, and she's offered to help. And I wrote to her and I said, look, we need some speakers and we need the same list.
The same list,
yeah. And can you check with the venue if they have speakers, or if not, with a local company, and same goes for the chairs and the whiteboard. And so I got an email back from her and she said, I've checked with the venue, they have a whiteboard, they have the chairs, and I've spoken to a local hire company because they didn't have the speakers at the venue, and attached is a detailed quote. So it's going to be £625 or something for the 3 days. Anyway, I was like, wow, that's a lot for a couple of speakers. And especially since they said that their rate for hire goes down by 50% every day you have it, so it's only 3 days, so that's a lot. And sure enough, there was a quotation for 2 speakers with XLR cables, which is what we want.
And
Plus,
the microphone stands.
And the microphone stands. Sorry, the microphone stands are always on the list, yep. And the microphone stands, as well as 2 microphones, a mixer desk, and a question about whether we want wired or handheld, wireless or handheld or wired mics for ourselves.
So Ella, what went on there?
What do you think happened behind the scenes there?
It's pretty obvious. What
Yeah. Well, I feel she's taken your directions, but she hasn't actually she's got the information back, but she hasn't actually taken the time to examine the quote herself, cross-reference it with your list.
No, I think so.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
What you're saying is true.
She has done that, but what happened before that for her to get that quote? Fee?
I reckon she was on the phone to someone and they've talked, probably a guy who said, you're going to need this too.
It is a guy.
Yeah, it's a guy.
It's a guy who's given the quote, yeah.
Who's spoken to an expert.
Exactly.
Confessed expert. And then they're like, well, this guy knows more than Jesus and Mary, so I'm going to just do the nice, helpful thing. But it's actually quite condescending to you guys as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are we going to have to do now? Says, sort of what are we?
You're going to have to follow up. You're going to have to follow up with the provider.
Yeah.
And ask how much.
Not at your throat, Says, just at your chin. That's it.
And ask what the price is for just the things you want.
That's right.
Let them know what exactly, just the things we want.
Now Ireland is, I think it's 7 hours. I think it's 7 hours.
It's
so
all of Europe is.
We're going to be out by 7 hours with everything we do now with Ireland. Yeah. But you can see if just the instructions were followed, and if she'd read the quote and go, this is not what was asked for.
But she obviously thinks.
But she got convinced by the provider because he believed we need something without even asking us. He believes we need these additional things, and there's also a general feeling in the provider, isn't there, obviously, that he would know more than what we would know, right, in providing the list. He's going, there's things missing out of this list that we would normally do, right? And so, of course, the presumptions are being made. So another question becomes, what's the addiction involved in presumption? You reckon that might be the addiction involved in presumption? Yeah. Corny, you want to?
That you believe you know better than others.
Yeah, there's a belief you know better. And why would we want to believe we know better? And sometimes we might know better, but why would we want to think we know better? Arch?
You can somewhat get some worth out of thinking that you know better. You're sort of almost an expert because you know this.
That's right. So our worth is involved with the idea that I know better. So in other words, what I know is how I get my worth. Now, how does God value worth? Is it based on what you know? Like, let's look at it. A baby knows nothing, really. Knows how to breathe and a few other mechanical things, doesn't it? How to eat, how to poo and wee, and a few other things like, voice, inarticulate sound and so forth. It obviously can feel feelings, but it can't even describe them. It doesn't even know how to describe them. The baby barely knows anything, but what does God think he's worth? He's worth the same as you. Right? So he knows nothing and you know everything. That's the general feeling most people have. And yet, from God's perspective, your worth isn't based on what you know. So whenever you are basing your worth on what you know, you are actually in an addiction. Right? And that addiction is going to play out in some way in your life, in a negative way. That addiction will play out in your life. Yep. So can you see that if my worth is based upon knowledge, then from God's perspective, it's not worth anything. Because your worth isn't based on knowledge from God's perspective. It's not based upon what you know. It's based upon, the fact that you just exist from God's perspective. That he created you and you exist. Of course, God gives more love to those people who ask for it and therefore are in better condition. But the net result is that God doesn't do that because you're worth more. So when you're loved more, it's not because you're worth more. It's because the person who's loving you, whether that's God or someone else, loves you. It's not because you're worth more than someone else. Now, how many times do we believe that if we're loved more, it means we're worth more? So, an example of that is family. I love my family more and they're worth more to me. In other words, if my family has a need, I respond. But if someone else other than my family has exactly the same need, I don't respond. And that's because we believe the people we love are worth more, which is actually an error with regard to our definition of love. Right? So if we look at some of these situations, you can see that love isn't the thing being considered. Now, of course, you don't expect a supplier who's never heard God's truth to necessarily be very loving, right? But a person who's been listening to God's truth for years, it would be nice if they understood the fundamentals of love, wouldn't it? And what I'm saying is the majority of people who've been listening to divine truth for years don't understand the fundamentals of love. And you see this acting out and playing out in practical situations every day of their life. Not only every day, mostly every hour of their life. You can see it playing out, right? Okay, so the loving thing to do there would be, if need be, you say back to the person, who is supplying the goods, we don't need these other things. No matter what you think, we've just been asked to supply these things. And that's it. Can you please give a quote for the delivery and the pickup of and the use of those things for that period? Now, because in this case, our sister involved, who is generous to us, like she's offering us to stay in her own home, she's actually moving out of her home while we're staying in it for a week, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So that's pretty generous, isn't it? How many of you would even think of doing that for somebody to move out of it and go somewhere else? That's a pretty generous thing to do. But when it comes to her interactions, intergender emotional injuries, immediately engaging them. As soon as the expert man comes along, right? And many of you girls do this, right? As soon as the expert man comes along, you are in the addiction immediately. Yeah? Can you see that? Yeah. Many of you have been doing this week with Aaron, who thinks he's an expert man to a degree. And many of you ladies have been doing exactly that. You've been playing out these addictions, right, with him. Now that doesn't help him. It doesn't help him at all. You need to address that. Remember when Nikki first came along, you did the same. Did it help Nikki?
No.
Right, what it did was it made him think that he was the expert, and made him think that all the things he already thought were actually increased. And so if we had all addressed it right at the beginning of Nikki coming, can you see there's a chance that Nikki might have responded a lot earlier about his arrogance and started to deal with it. Does that make sense? But because the addiction was in play, his addiction and yours were in play, you fed the addiction because of your own addiction, both unloving acts, and then the person who's here to learn about God's way, God's truth, is getting distorted further through the addiction. Right? So this is a good thing about being here. We can address these issues, but you know, when it's people we've barely met or had hardly anything to do with for years, you can see we don't have the opportunity to address these things with them. They are going to need to have some self-awareness that this is what's going on. And you can see how easy it is to not have it, can't you? Like the average person who listens, how many years did you listen to Divine Truth before you came here, Nikki? Can I just get the mic to Nikki?
You mean this time round?
No, I mean, how many?
When did you first hear Divine Truth?
I first heard it in 2013.
2013.
I met you guys in 2014
Yeah.
in Wonkarai
Yeah.
at the AG.
Yeah.
But you didn't really spend any time.
How do you spend any time with us?
I spent a bit of time, not that much.
When you say a bit of time, an hour or two
Yeah,
If that.
at the most.
yeah, if that. Maybe the odd dinner and stuff
The
like
odd
that.
dinner,
With
yeah,
others, yeah.
But really, I'd say when my addiction started getting challenged was when Jesus, you started in 2016 with me. When I came with Dave Raisman.
That's right.
And Courtney.
Yeah.
You clocked it in me. And
well, no, I clocked it way before.
Way before, obviously, yeah.
We both clocked it from 2014.
From the time we met.
From 2014, okay, yeah, fair enough. And that's when I started feeling, I don't know this.
Can I just also say in here, it's interesting you say Jesus clocked it. Yes, he did. There were a number of other women who tried to point it out to you, but you couldn't even hear them.
Yes.
At all. You could only hear it from a man.
From a man, yes.
And if you were more competitive with a man, which by the way you are fairly competitive, you're only hearing bits and pieces of what I say. Because the rest, see, what most people don't understand emotionally is that while I've got specific emotional injuries, what happens is I've got these emotional injuries are filters. That you could almost call them EQs on my ears. And what I mean by EQs, if for a technical sound, is equalising your ears. So it's sort of like
cancelling out some sound.
This emotion says cancel out him saying that, and all of a sudden it's on mute. He's talking and lips are moving, but I'm not really registering. And then, that bit sounds good. Turn that back on sound, so I can listen to that. But we don't realise how much of our absorption of what's being said to us is not actually getting through, because there's all these emotional reasons why we don't want to hear it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And why we don't want to know, and why we think what we think, and why we want to think what we think, and so forth. So the reality is the very first email I got from you, which is way before I met you.
Gosh, yeah,
2013.
2013, yeah.
I knew what the problem was.
Yeah.
But how do you address that by email without writing like 25 pages of text? You can't really, can you? It's impossible to address by email. And in fact, it's really, what can be said in a 10-minute conversation might take, 4 hours of email to write. So it's not a very economical use of my time either to address it by email, which is the reason why I don't. And that's why nobody emails me anymore. Right? Thank you for that. And because the real interactions are the ones that you need to have personally, aren't they?
Yes, well, that's when I really started getting confronted emotionally.
Yes, but only from me. The women you just completely ignored.
Yep.
And it wasn't until Mary started making some comments to you in 2018 or 19.
Oh no, on the way to the airport.
2016 yes, I remember this, yeah.
Yeah.
You were saying about the song and stuff.
Yeah.
Every time I heard that song afterwards, it just reminded me of what you said. But yes, I remember in the car journey,
Yeah.
you were bringing stuff up
Yeah.
with me, and I felt
And
very
also Elle had
uncomfortable.
tried to raise things.
Elle
with
did,
you.
Lena did as well.
Yeah.
Lena did.
Courtney
Lena.
did, she tried.
Yep,
Yeah.
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 And my feeling was, a woman's telling me something I don't like, I'm going to just ignore the woman.
Well, the actual emotion is whatever a woman says, unless it's got some sexual thing associated with it, then basically you can ignore it. Yeah, because my mum likes me.
Mm.
I don't need another woman to like me. My mum's already. I've already been taught by my mother that I'm her favourite man in the world. So if somebody says I've got a flaw, well, my mother doesn't think I've got one, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
And there's very little assessment of what God feels in that place. You see. So this is why we do what we do in most situations, is because we are already in the addictions without knowledge. We do them on automatic. And we have no idea what we're doing most of the time on automatic. And at some point, the relationship with God is going to expose that to you if you can listen to God. But the majority of you can't listen yet. Like, you can't even listen to a man speaking to you right to your face what the problem is. So how are you going to listen to God's feelings about you? You're going to have to be really sensitive to feelings, aren't you? To be able to hear God's feelings about what you're doing and what you're saying and how you're acting and what the injuries are and everything. And the most difficult thing most people find after they receive the very first of God's love, when they are sincere, when it comes to progress, is they don't want to hear what God's got to say about them, right? And the only way you can grow infinitely is to hear what God's got to say. It's the only way infinite growth is possible, by hearing what God's got to say. Remember, whatever God says is truth. So I'm also saying it's only by accepting the reality of God's truth that you're ever going to grow infinitely. That makes sense, doesn't it? And every time we act in an addiction, and then when somebody says, like, how many times have I said to many of you, oh, this is an addiction, and you go, oh, yeah, but it's, how many times internally have you felt, but it's only little. Why are you complaining about that? Why are you raising that for? You know, that's only a small thing. Isn't anything that interferes with your eternal growth a large thing? I've assumed so. That's how I sort of look at everything. I go, well, if it's interfering with my relationship with God, then and my growth in it, then it's a big thing. It's not a small thing. And I need to address it. I need to become aware first, and then I need to address it. To do that, you need to be very humble. But addictions make you arrogant. They don't make you humble. They make you arrogant. You believe you need them and want them, and you believe they're necessary.
And that they're truthful.
And
that
they're truthful.
Like
Yeah.
the proper way to conduct yourself almost.
That's right. That's right. So in the case of the island situation, you can see the addiction, just to listen to the arrogant, opinionated expert, is now going to cost Mary and I quite a lot more additional time. Right? So even though the person involved feels she's being helpful, and she has been helpful in many other ways, she found the venue for us in Ireland. She's also offering her home, so has been very helpful. In this case, the addiction has rendered her unhelpful. Can you see that? Yeah. And it's interesting, that's what our addictions do. That they actually interfere with the smooth operation of things. That's what addictions do. Yeah. Okay, so should we go?
Yeah. Did you want to ask?
Elle, you want to?
Yeah, I'm just noticing with addictions, you get dumb, you get, like, everyone say dumb, but there's also this like you can't hear the truth and you get arrogant, but it's like they, like, you don't see things anymore. Like you don't see clearly. Oh, sorry, thank you. You don't see clearly, and you don't see. It's like you don't notice things anymore, and it's like really. I'm finding it quite challenging, even in our group. You know, every time, because we've got all these different things playing out with different ones of us. You know, and there's gender like addictions between the women and the men going on, and sometimes it's quite challenging to find out just what the truth is. You know, and when you're talking about the stuff with God, you know, the lack of humility, it's like our addictions make us unhumble. So, I suppose...
They're just a product of a lack of humility, aren't they?
Yes, sorry, it's just notable how unhumble I am.
Well, you say they make us unhumble,
They don't make you.
And unhumble isn't probably a word, but they actually, your addictions are the result of a lack of humility. The lack of humility causes the addiction. Because if you think about it, humility is possible if you feel everything.
Correct.
Humility is possible, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So addictions are caused by the lack of humility.
They support you.
They support
the
lack of humility supports all of your addictions. It's what creates all.
And that's the purpose of the addiction.
That is the purpose of the addiction, to make you lack humility.
To help you remain detuned from the feelings.
That's right. That's the purpose of addiction. So you can see that the more arrogant a person is, it's highly likely they're going to have a lot more addictions.
Yeah. Or you find out how arrogant you are when there's certain things being peeled away, and then you get to the addiction that's my adored addiction.
Yeah.
And now the arrogance is different.
And the arrogance is particularly with God, because you're basically saying, God's saying this is not love, and you're saying, but I think it is.
Yeah.
Aren't you really?
Yeah.
So I know better than you.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah.
It's really what you're saying about, and all of our addictions are really saying that to God. Yeah. And most of us don't understand how much lack of love we have for God by living in our addiction.
Yeah.
Because our addictions are fundamentally saying, I don't love you. Yeah. I don't agree with your version of love. I know better. Yeah. Is really what we're saying to God in that place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, so